High.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I must say, just by way of introduction and responding, that it is a bit rich to be lectured by Mr David Shearer about democracy from a party that was the author of the Electoral Finance Act, and also to have a member raise the issue of concern around establishing Watercare as, a CCO from a member who's advocated privatising all the military of the word. And I just find that sort of quite breathtaking. But what I want to say, Mr Chairman, is this. I need to advise the committee that as a consequence of the government accepting Mr Hawkins's SOP, that further work has shown that we'll need to withdraw two amendments for SOP number 136. The first is to amend new section 75(2)(d) on page 11 of the SOP. The second is the amendment to the heading to clause 74A on page 13 of the SOP. The reason that we need to withdraw them is because they're ministerial SOPs, they'd take precedences over Mr Hawkins, and if the House did vote on them, they'd render his SOP null and void. And again, Mr Speaker, I do want to commend the Labor Party and George Hawkins for the work that he's done on that SOP. I've actually had feedback over the dinner break from the people of Auckland, very pleased with it. I think it's a consequence of the hard work that the Honourable George Hawkins does. First as a councillor at Papakura, he was a mayor for 9 years, and of course he's been a member of Parliament and representing his electorate of Manuera for 20 years. And I want to contrast his approach and maybe give some help to my colleague, Mr Phil Twyford, because we haven't needed in the ACT Party to have any of our MPs ask me any patsy questions, because we actually have Mr Phil Twyford who does it for us when it comes to the necessary of questions. But here's my point. George Hawkins has actually represented the people of Auckland, and he's actually put forward an SOP that has made a difference to the future governance of Auckland. Contrast that to Mr Phil Twyford, who's made a lot of noise and a lot of sound and a lot of fury, but actually hasn't made one positive contribution. As a consequence of that failure, he has failed to have his own party select him to represent the North Shore, failed to select him in Auckland Central, failed to select him in Mount Albert.
Point of order. I think I can guess. Relevance?
Yes, relevance, but I also buried amongst that irrelevance. The Minister mentioned clause 74 that would need amending, and could he remind me the other clause that he mentioned?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I'll get to that, Mr Chairman, so that member will listen more carefully, and I'll repeat it. But what I will say is, and I'm quite happy to speak to the point of order, Mr Speaker,
Order. I should have ruled on the point of order. I think the Minister had strayed a wee bit away from the bill at large to a general debate kind of approach. You could just return and refer to the clauses that need amending.
Sure. And in doing so, these are a consequence of the work that George Hawkins did as a member that represents Auckland, and I was contrasting that to members that don't represent Auckland, and I understand, sir, that Mr Phil Twyford's now seeking the nomination in New Plymouth. So good luck, Mr Phil Twyford, in New Plymouth, because clearly even the Labor Party don't think you're up to it in Auckland. For the benefit of Steve Chadwick, the amendments to the SOP number 136 in my name. The first is to amend new section 75(2)(d) on page 11 of the SOP. She's got that one. And the second is the amendment to the heading to clause 74A on page 13 of the SOP. And finally, once again, I would like to thank George Hawkins, and I think it is a good day for the people of Howick and Pakuranga and Botany, because this is a government that actually listens, unlike the Labour Party that wants to be all PC and actually not listen to the good voters of Auckland.